Oh, yeah.
Hey, stretch out if you want to put it on the wall. So I can do it.
All right, peace and blessings, family. Good evening.
Good evening.
So my name is Adam Jackson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Leaders of the Beautiful Struggle. I want to welcome you to tonight's event, our Malcolm X talk around sexuality and gender, particularly Black family divisions around sexuality and gender. So today, this is our first Malcolm X talk for 2020. And, we want to actually do something a little bit different in a different space and actually have a conversation rather than it being a traditional lecture or some of the things that we traditionally do at LBS. If you're familiar with LBS, we're a grassroots political organization. We do political advocacy, particularly around legislation, locally and statewide. And so we decided to partner here at the Amasi Center with Black Men's Exchange because we want to talk about this particular topic and figure out a way to have this dialogue with just Black people in the room, which is oftentimes very difficult to do. I'll step aside. I'm going to let Brother Duke and Brother Cleo lead the conversation here tonight. I'm going to be an active participant as well. Just so you know, there's also live streaming on our Facebook page. But they'll give us kind of the rundown for how tonight's going to go. And also get comfortable because we're going to get to know each other, talk, have conversation tonight. And I appreciate y'all for coming out here for our first Malcolm X talk. All right, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Duke again. I am a spoken word artist, poet, worker for the Amasi Center, which you are currently in. Welcome to the Amasi Center for Black Culture and Wellness. Woo! Woo! You get class there. This space is for you. What we do here is, again, lectures, peer meetings, community groups. This space is also available for venue booking as well. I, for one, had my book release here, but there's also been retreats here and trainings as well. In addition to that, I am a coordinator for Black Men's Exchange, which is a national organization under the network of Amasi that focuses on reducing anti-Black impulses and behaviors, building up Black people to be better assets to each other in the community. And this is all through the leadership, work, and curriculum developed by Dr. Cleo Manago, who is also co-facilitating this particular discussion here tonight. So please give it up for Dr. Cleo Manago, who is a TV pundit, curriculum professor, all those things. That being said, welcome to tonight's topic of Black family division around sexuality and gender. With that being said, is this anyone's first time having an intentionally Black conversation about this subject? Show of hands. We got one person. Now, let me clarify. I don't mean like being in a safe space, quote unquote, or a gay space. I mean actually coming together with diverse Black people to talk about this conundrum in our community, not on Facebook. All right. So we got apparently a couple of learned people here. With that being said, we wanted to open tonight really trying to discuss whether or not this is a topic is an extension or distraction of the Black community. To that effect, we wanted to ask some questions of the audience. What are your general thoughts or knowledge about this particular topic when it comes to Black people interacting with sexuality and gender expression? I want to stress that this is not a PC conversation. I don't need you to have all the proper language. I don't need you to be respectful of certain pronouns and hymns. We're trying to get to how people really feel in this room. We're expert facilitators. We got this. But To that end, if anyone wants to open it up, what are your thoughts around the topic around sexuality and gender in the Black community? Anyone? Yes.
My name is Tyrone Moore. I'm a native of Baltimore. I think in my studies are in African history, traditional, and psychology, African psychology. I think that one of the things that falls out of, see, we're in a particular context. Think of it as a box, American culture, right here. I'm not jumping to other cultures yet, but just staying right in this culture. And basically, we have been defined by another group, in this case, white America. And being defined by another group, that group has also said that we are superior as white people, and you as people of color, you are inferior. Having said that, they went about the process of destroying our self-concept and the respect that we had for ourselves individually and for ourselves collectively as a group. Now, having said that, talking about sexuality, when you don't allow, this is, my thoughts, when you don't allow a particular individual or group of people to express what the Creator has given them, and are not religious, they're spiritual. When you don't allow, when you stop the growth, and all things that are living tend towards growth, to grow, and to become more conscious. You look at nature, you see that all the time. So we've been shut down in terms of our growth. And the best example is through the educational process. We haven't been allowed to understand the type of culture that we come from. And having said that, that stunts the growth in terms of our ability to figure out things such as a definition of sexuality, a definition of what is man's role, a definition of what is a woman's role. So in ending, it's about these kind of conversations begin us again to recreate and establish our own narrative. This is where it begins at.
Sure. Now, excuse me a second, Duke. I have some contextual things I want to mention so we can get this on the ball. Also, we need another piece of paper on the wall where we can mark down what people say. What we're doing right now, and I want to preface what I'm going to say with what Duke said in terms of we're not trying to be PC. You're not going to be attacked for having your perspective in this room. Even if your perspective is anti-something or anti-somebody, as long as you're respectful and don't start over with that MF before you go into it. You can say what you want to say. This is not no LGBTQ agenda. Imprison your mind so you can go join the queer movement agenda here. This is a black agenda. And we want you to say what you feel. And if you have seen the light and you're no longer so-called homophobic, whatever, talk about how you used to be so we can feel this piece of paper with our attitudes that black people actually have about this issue. What we're doing right now, which is part of an exercise, is we're not giving dissertations. We're going to put on the wall attitudes and perspectives and how people feel about this issue among black people, including your own perspective, the perspective that you heard about the issue of homosexuality, for example, and gender nuance in a black community context. So do we have a paper up? Can we bring it further up here? Yeah, so we can all see it as the list is being developed. A greeting, sister and brother. What we're doing right now, when you get finished, is we're making a list of attitudes and perspectives black people have around issues of sexuality and gender, or homosexuality specifically. What people think about that issue. So,
I'll go ahead and just talk about my experience.
Well, before you get into a long experience, we're gonna fill up this thing with attitude,
Yeah.
like for example,
Yeah, okay.
well, I don't wanna give no words, I don't wanna give no scripts, but I want you to start saying how you feel, or how people feel about this issue, black people.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that what you're gonna do?
Yes.
Okay.
When it comes to anything outside of traditional male and female roles in black culture, it makes people uncomfortable. It's something that people will not openly talk about.
So how would you describe that attitude?
So it's
Black people are,
black people are against this.
okay.
Traditionally.
Against, let's put that up there. Black people are against what?
Untraditional sexuality.
Okay. Black people are against untraditional
Our
sexuality.
gender roles.
Okay.
It's something, attitudes. I'm trying to get words.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, attitudes, beliefs, and alleged knowledge on the topic.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead in the back.
Good evening, my name is Rhonda Ortiz. I think that there is an overuse of the term homophobic.
Now, is that coming from external to the black community, or is that inside of the black community?
Both, I think
Okay.
both. I think that there is, I don't know if it's, I would say a disrespect or fear or of the expression of heterosexualism. I think that when comments are made or when the discussion is made, it goes into you're homophobic. It's
Okay.
like, I can't have an opinion, we're going to respect each other, where we are in life and whatever our
And that can
sexuality.
kind of shut down conversations.
Right, if you are expressing your sexuality and how you feel about it, and you don't want to be judged or labeled, then I'm a heterosexual woman, I should be able to express
Okay.
that, and you not say you're homophobic.
All right, now you're editorializing on your perspective. And what I want you all to do going forward is not that. But thank you. Now, don't editorialize. Don't editorialize yet on what you think. Just tell us what the issue is. Because we only got a couple of minutes up in here, and we're going to end this. And I want to make sure we have some conversation once some more things are raised. So, overuse of the term homophobic, black people are against non-traditional sexuality and gender roles. We should add gender roles to that.
Okay.
Our ideas about sexuality and gender are actually colonized.
Mm.
Got that?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that our attitudes are stigmatizing
All right, there's a stigmatizing of what?
in terms of the belief system around sexuality and gender. I think
It stigmatizes what?
in terms of people who identify with a certain sexuality or gender, I think it can be stigmatizing, the attitudes of black folks.
Okay, stigmatizing attitudes.
I hope I'm phrasing this in the way that you're trying to create this list, but one thing that I've noticed is it's like black people tend to create this like dichotomy, like it's like you can't be black and homosexual, you're not black and trans, you're not, like you have to choose one, and that's often a host of experiences that come as a result of that, where there are black people who feel like they fit in more in white spaces because they're no longer accepted by their own communities, or, you know what I mean, on the flip side, black families that ostracize their children or, you know, kin that are a part of whatever part of the spectrum because they're like, you're not black no more because you this. And
Choose between race and sexuality.
yeah, and then it's also this connection to, like, you hear people say, like that ain't African, so then it's beyond just, like, blackness in this context, it's like, that has never been a part of our story, even that, you know, on the continent, or, like, classical Africa. So that's not here.
Classical
Okay.
Africa.
There's a few things
Oh.
that
You know,
choice. There's people force you to try to force you to make a choice between sexuality and race. That's one of the things. Oh, you already have it. I'm sorry. And she talked about the last thing she just said You just left. The last thing, part of what you.
About
It's,
that
not
ain't African.
Oh, that's not African, that's it. Very important.
They say
And
just like
homosexuality is not African.
I'm just gonna throw a word out there, but religion, I often hear religion coupled with this topic.
And usually,
affirming sex.
when it's brought up, the attitude on this issue is what?
Negative.
Okay. Negative. Come on, y'all know y'all
Can we
can
put,
hear it.
can we put demon next to
You can put anything on there you want. as long as
No,
it's-
for real, like in church, they be saying like homosexuality is a demon, like it needs to be exorcised.
Yeah, two things I've heard. One thing I've heard in my family is that kind of exasperation with having to accept another family member's just way of being. They're like, I'll do it, but like they're clearly like having an attitude of exasperation about it. Something else.
Like begrudging.
Anxiety and around having a homosexual family member.
Anxiety.
Begrudging yourself.
We'll make sure you get your thoughts.
Yeah.
There was something else, but maybe later. I think I lost my.
But are we correct when we say that there's black people have anxiety around having a family member? That's homosexual itself?
Yeah.
Does that fit? Okay. I don't wanna.
Oh, and then also, some people in my family will attribute a person's just way of being. They'll say that's not really who they are. They're
Brainwashed?
that way because of some trauma.
So that'd be a trauma assumption,
Trauma assumption.
Trauma assumption. All right, good.
which means everybody black will be homosexual, but anyway. Was that? I mean, it's trauma, it's based on trauma. Anyway, anybody else?
They're apathetic. So there's a lack of empathy. There's not like, it's almost just like, well, I can't connect with that, so I can't sympathize with you.
Few more? We heard a lot from primarily women.
Freedom of identity.
Freedom of identity. What is the perspective on it?
Sexuality is expressing yourself, and knowing, feeling comfortable with yourself. So freedom of identity or identity freedom
That's a black attitude on this issue?
can be.
Is that what you meant when you said that?
Yes.
Okay.
There's some nuance.
I think I would say, like as far as the black issue, men on the down low. You don't hear that in terms of with white people at all. I feel like it's only been a black context. That phrase.
You wanna get up here and lead this workshop? We got.
See, there's so much to unpack, and I think, well, I won't get into that right now. And there's a lot to unpack, and I want to make sure we get a few more attitudes.
I just had another word or idea, just displacement coupled with homelessness, as in that's a solution or that's an immediate reaction.
What's the reaction?
Home, to be kicked out.
Displacement.
Be kicked out.
Displacement.
Kicked out, absolutely.
You put choice, I said identity.
Oh, excuse me.
That's okay.
Someone,
Oh, no, I like that. Thank you.
someone on Facebook said avoidance, acting like it doesn't exist.
Yes. I see you. Those first.
And I don't know if this is a shared attitude, but given that I work in spaces with people who are of the LGBTQ community who don't look like me, I get tired of
Come on, white folks or somebody else?
Yeah,
Let's
white
say white in this
folks.
room.
The conversation
We don't give our chickens.
They're not here.
Say what you want to say.
that struggle being compared to the struggle of
Black
black
people.
people.
Like,
I
gays
get
are new black,
so
have you heard that
tired.
line?
Yeah, I get so tired of that. You cannot convince me.
Gays are new black.
Yeah.
I saw Breon and then the lady in the back. Huh?
I was trying to remember what I was gonna say. Maxine.
All right, ma'am.
I just use the word dehumanization.
Dehumanize.
Who's the humanizing?
Dehumanize, like the attitude, treating
this is, I haven't heard from her yet, so let's say something.
I have a one-word topic as well, violence.
Toward?
The energy of that's attracting or what a gay person may experience because of their sexuality and identity from individuals who are traumatized by that experience of the violence towards the community, safety.
Reggie, if you could unfold those papers for us, So here at Mossy, we actually taken the liberty to create our own list just to cross-relate. We feel that we are, yes, if you could, please, express what we know to be some of the beliefs, perspectives, and knowledge around this issue in the Black community. So I'll go over that list briefly with you all. So we said that there's this common perception that Black is the most homophobic community in the world. There's a perception that, why are we even talking about this in the first place? Why is this relevant? There's the perspective of homosexuality as an import of white racism. There's also the perspective of it is the emasculation and feminization of Black males in a white supremacist context. There's also a perspective that no father in the home equals sexuality and gender confusion. There's a perspective of homosexuality is not African in the first place. We added that as well. There's also a perspective that Black homosexuals are less harmful to white supremacy and therefore less impacted by it, less violence. That is one. Of course, we have it as an abomination. And we've also had that homosexuality is a result of some type of sexual molestation and or pedophilia. In combination with the list that we have here, do we think we missed anything? We're going on.
Have you heard the things that he mentioned that are not up there? Have you heard them before?
Yeah.
Have you heard them like more than once? Okay, because he was hoping somebody that came out of the room, you know, so we, unveil that.
Oh yeah, with that being said, our goal tonight is not to convince you of anything. It is simply to educate. Now that we've listed these particular perspectives and beliefs, we're going to go into a presentation of what we have here tonight. But again, our goal ultimately is just to build solidarity between Black people. And to that end, we have some information that we encourage you all, challenge you all to look up on your own research, as well as note that this space is available and open to you because this is only a part one of the discussion. We're very grateful that Leaders of the Beautiful Struggle has decided to partner us with this event. But please, this is an ongoing workshop, if you will, to that end.
Thank you, Lou. I want to reiterate that the goal here is to have conversation about this. I think because of how hardcore and, well, I'll just use that word right now, the gay community could be when somebody does something they don't like. You saw what happened to Tracy Morgan, you saw what happened to Kobe Bryant, you saw what happened to Roland Martin. There's been some other people who have been accused, Black, who have been accused of homosexual, being anti-homosexual. There was a scorched earth attack, some people losing jobs. Kobe was fined $100,000. And I think that at this point, the white gay community now, a lot of people think it's just everybody, but you'll find out today that this is white folks. But the white gay community is very, very powerful and omnipresent and everywhere. It might be in your refrigerator, I mean everywhere. And have lots and lots of power. And they have caused a lot of silence on this issue in terms of people actually saying what they really feel. And there's been a lot of Black people who have not had Black spaces to actually feel who they are, who went to white racism for some type of sanctuary, who brought their rhetoric over here to shut you down as Black people. We ain't doing that. You know, my work and who I am and what I'm about is not even nowhere near inside of that context or that construct. My work is Black. It's about Black family, conversations, unlearning dysfunctional ways that we interact with each other that shuts us down and gets in the way of us progressing and unifying as a people so we can have power as a collective too. We cannot have a power as a collective too if we have all of these unstated things that have us acting out on each other and creating friction. One of the reasons why we are not as advanced in terms of power attainment as a people at this point is because of the splits and the gossip and the unsaid things that are acted out more than talked out. So this is not just about me giving a presentation. Matter of fact, this presentation, compared to what I could talk about, is very abbreviated because we don't have much time, and I really want this to be more of a conversation. But throughout the presentation, if you have a question or a challenge or whatever, just don't start it off with MF or something. Like I said, just be nice about it. It's cool. And like Duke said, we're not here to convince you of anything. One of the things that I say all the time, and I'll reiterate it tonight, is that do your own research. And if you have a different perspective after you've done it than what you've heard tonight, share it. As Duke mentioned, we're going to be doing this kind of work, and we've been doing this kind of work for decades, but we're doing it now in Baltimore, and we're trying to make being black a better place for all kinds of black people, so we can actually be powerful, because we can't be powerful in conflict. And there's some legitimate anti-homosexual sounding perspective black people have. Like the sister back there said, sometimes the term homophobic is overused. There's something else going on among black people that's being called homophobic because we have a white lens that doesn't look at the nuance and history and context of being black in terms of what's really going on. So some of that's going to come out in this presentation, but more of it's going to come out if you're candid in our conversation. This ain't about being PC. You're not going to get a gay award. Nothing like that, especially from me. But anyway, here we go with the presentation thing. Thank you. Okay, now because of the fact that images are powerful and iconic people, in fact, unfortunately, because sometimes they have no credibility, none of you that smart, but we know who they are because they're iconic. They influence what we do and what we say. So there will be people who are well known in the presentation, not because they're better than us, but because that they exist has influenced some of us in terms of how we think. And we're going to talk about images of SGL bi, gender fluid African people. This is the tomb of Ninkumen and Kuhotep from the 5th dynasty. How many of you have ever been to Kemet? Okay, real quickly, before I went for the first time, which was 2 years ago, I had heard about this tomb between these two brothers who were buried together. And I would always ask scholars that some of you may have heard of, some who have passed away, like Ben Yakimin and John Henry Clark. Did you go to this tomb? Did you go to the tomb of Khnum Hotep when you went to Kemet and they shut down? And every time I asked somebody about it, I thought people were shut down so much, I got so quiet. I thought, okay, that white folks lying again. These people don't exist. They made this up, and it don't exist. Well, the reason I put this picture with me in the tomb, to let you know, and I'm in Kemet. My body was in this tomb. It exists, and this is a same-gender-loving couple from the 5th dynasty of Kemet who were buried together. Now, one of the things that I request that you do, and I imagine LBS makes similar requests, to do your best to understand that, as this brother mentioned earlier, that you live in a box, a white supremacist mythological box, and that your impulses and perspectives are contaminated by that box, and some of you can't even fathom thinking in ways that are outside of that prison. Well, you're going to have to attempt to do that or consider doing that when you think about what we talked about tonight, because it ain't going to be in that prison. And for example, these people never heard the word gay or LGBTQ or Elton John or Ellen or whatever. They don't know nothing about that. Matter of fact, when they were around, there was no Europe. Right. There was no such thing. And the reason I said get outside of the LGBTQ lens, because even though these two men were the love of each other's lives, they had wives and they had children. See, that don't fit in the LGBTQ lexicon. But in parts of Africa, you love him and everything, and that's cute and everything, but you better have some children, and you better reproduce. But if you understand hieroglyphics, anybody understand hieroglyphics in this room? Okay, well I'm gonna give you a short symbolic education. Go to the next slide, please. Can we get that down some? I did this real quickly because if you see an image of a bunch of people with their profile going the same way, those are usually soldiers. When you see people who are nose to nose like this, that's usually a romantic relationship. Hieroglyphics is very symbolic. Everything is symbolic. It's a language, but it's a symbolic-based language. So I brought this up here so you can understand that this is not, brothers. So some people try to make it because they can't handle the truth. brothers wouldn't be posing like that. They would be posing like that if they're in a relationship with each other. Now, people who say that there's no such thing as same-gender people in Africa have some personal challenges they're dealing with where they can't handle that reality. They may have not done any research. As I mentioned before, some of the top scholars, every time I ask about that, they shut down. I didn't go, what are you talking about? But it's there. As a matter of fact, if you go to the previous slide, when you get to the tombs, this is their names on it, because there's some other people buried over there as well. And they're there. Next, please. And that's me sitting there tripping off of all the times I was trying to find out what was going on. Nobody told me that some leaders couldn't go going down. That's what I'm doing in that picture. Can't get me damn, but that's what I'm saying. And these are some of our ancestors who were either same-gender loving or bisexual or gender nuance. Now, that's not an African term. I use that term to talk about this in this country. The whole desperation to be particularly male, which is usually a Roman statue, trying to recreate that kind of concept in this country. And the whole concept of being female over here is European. Mm-hmm. Everybody has so-called male and female traits. Mm-hmm. When a man loves his son, that ain't female, that's a human being loving his son. When he wants to embrace somebody, hold somebody's hand, but God forbid it's a male, even though in Africa they do that all the time. But over here, oh no, oh my God, that means that you're going to have sex tomorrow. That ain't what it means. It means you're going to hold their hand. But anyway, we have all these issues and stuff because we live inside the box recognition that has us so self-conscious we can't even flow and be fluid as human beings. So this is right here is Kabaka Mwanga. Who's heard of Kabaka Mwanga? Okay, don't forget to do your own research. I'm going to be really brief about these people because of time. Kabaka Mwanga, his whole name was Zaneri Basamula Ikere Mwanga. The second Mukasa was the Kabaka, which means king of Buganda, which is now called Uganda, because white folks have to control stuff and change it from what it was. So it's now called Uganda, but it was called Buganda. In the late 1800s, he was the king of Buganda. He was also a man who had a male and female harem. Anybody know what a harem is? And ironically, particularly when you think about the fact that some people claim that homosexuality wasn't in Africa, he was the last king who was fighting and beating and killing white folks for trying to take over his kingdom. He was the last pre-colonial emperor of Buganda. And there's more to it. He burned some folks and all kinds of stuff. But we won't get to that tonight. This is Hatshepsut. If you look at Hatshepsut from a Western perspective, Hatshepsut is transgender. Now, does anybody know anything about Hatshepsut? Mm-hmm. When they first found Hatshepsut's tomb, because of the beard and some of the iconography, they thought that they had found a man. Mm-hmm. They did research and they did x-rays and said, oh, wait a minute, there's a vagina up in here. They found out that, Hatshepsut was not a biological male, but a woman, but she dressed like a man. And there's more to Hatshepsut, but that's not, that beard is really a rope behind it and keeping it on, but she was a woman. This is Akhenaten. Oh yeah, Hatshepsut was the fifth pharaoh. She was a pharaoh, the ruler of Kemet during the 18th dynasty. She was the fifth pharaoh. So she wasn't no joke either. I mean, if you ever go to Kemet, they have, no joke at all, this sister. We don't got time. Akhenaten ruled Kemet for 17 years, and Akhenaten is somebody who African scholars and even Europeans who created the whole schism around self-consciousness around sexual fluidity in the spectrum. You rarely see pictures of Akhenaten below the waist. They're always like that. Let's go to the next picture. This is Akhenaten where you can see their female hips, if you will. I put that in quotes because they're really his hips. But because they appear to be female, they always have him taking pictures of like this. Now I don't know I didn't hang out with Akhenaten, so I don't know what was happening with Akhenaten, but I want to tell you that he's created gender anxiety among some Africans who need black men, in particular, to be man, to make up for castration. But we get to that later. Next. Oh, question? I heard a question.
So what are you saying?
I'm saying that Akhenaten's pictures are usually from here up. I took that picture. I'm sorry. Yeah, go on.
So normally, especially for Egyptian pharaohs and icons of the time past, Kemetic, if it's a male figure, they're usually very, very skinny in nature. Is a muscular build of some sort, a skinny muscular build. Their stomach is usually very small framed, combined with the typical pose that you normally see. When you see a woman, however, their hips are almost always posed in this particular way. However, Akhenaten's statue, which was taken down, which was created during the time of his reign, has this particular image in iconography. And now, as people are looking back over, because there's no knowledge or proof about what was going on, but there's belief and reason to believe that he may have been intersex because of the combined nature of his masculine and female features.
Yeah, I felt like y'all was alluding to something. I was like,
Well,
we're not
thank
looking
you.
at it.
I'm trying to do this, but thank you, dude. That was great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Could you also share why Akhenaten's, the anxiety of white scholars and some African black scholars was so much, explain how important an individual they were. Like, he was like the Socrates, the Buddha, the greatest thinker,
really
philosopher.
Those people were the Akhenatens, you know that, right? They really were the Akhenatens of everything. But I know they were here first.
In terms of African cosmology and universal, he was.
He created monotheism.
Monotheism, that there was one God that we all are under, and that's why I believe people are so unnerved. How can such great thinking come from an individual that we would ignorantly call a big sissy boy, come up with such brilliance and genius? That can't be. And I wasn't aware of this. I heard little, but I'd never seen. No one could ever show me the full sculpture to now. And so that's why that's like for white folks. Albert Einstein wore a dress and stilettos when he came up with his theory of relativity. That would unnerve white European scholars and white manhood so much. So I just wanted to share what a big deal and a contributor to society Akhenaten was.
Also, similar to myself, Akhenaten wouldn't kill nothing. He wouldn't kill a roach. He wouldn't kill a rat. He wouldn't kill anything. He didn't believe in killing life forms of any kind.
Question. So the pharaoh that was that had the rope, had the beard.
Hatshepsut.
Say the name again.
Hatshepsut.
Yes. So my question becomes, I'm going to assume that people knew.
Oh yeah.
So yes, but where did it get lost? Because not only this is all new to me, but it is also within our community where we get some of these fables, like being gay is not African. It's not an African thing.
Well, being gay is not, but we'll talk about that later.
Well, there was no gay.
It's talking about homosexuality, right? Homosexuality.
I'm trying to snap in the firm. I think it's a
but I hear you.
But that question definitely gets answered. Yes.
But if you go to Kemet, I'm going to ask you a question. Do people know? If you go to Kemet and go to Hatshepsut's, the monument that was built back when she was alive, they show her in her as a woman. They show her in all kinds of ways. But we live in this box that this brother mentioned. That's an intentional box. It ain't accidental. I mean, for example, you probably heard of a film called The Gods of Egypt that came out, and it had what's that dude? Tom Cruise running around, and some white woman coming out of a tomb. If you go to Kemet, which those people have, some of those people so black. This is light skin. This. Yeah, I mean, in those tombs. You can stay out there, you can see them, they're on the wall. I mean, they know what they're recreating for the myth of white supremacy. So there's lots of stuff we don't know because it's being kept from us.
Let me ask you a question.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, the definition of Pharaoh, picking back to the Bible, Pharaoh had people enslaved. They're going forward. The making of a slave by the man who wrote that letter, it came back. It went back to Pharaoh. So I want to know how you define Pharaoh in Africa. What is a Pharaoh?
Okay, if anyone needs to add to this, that's fine. But we're going to refer to a pharaoh as the king, the ruler of Kemet.
One of the things you have to be careful about when we talk about the pharaohs of ancient Kemet is because in their cosmology, from the waters of chaos came Amun. And Amun produced Ra. And Ra began to produce twins, Nun, Nunet, Kun, Kunet. It's three pairs that it produced out of it in terms of the cosmology. And we have to be careful of. The ancient Kemetic people understood that male and female was a part of nature itself, not just embedded or embodied in the human form. So I'm not sure, I'm listening to you, but I'm not sure whether Akhenaten, who got in trouble with the high priest of Luxor and Thebes and all that, because he brought in monotheism. But before that, the ancient Kemetic people had a number of gods, and it depended on where you were at, up in Lower Egypt, Upper Egypt, the name of the gods and how many gods you had. But they always had that twin type thing. And I don't know if he's symbolizing in his physical form, not so much that he's not transgender or whatever, but whether he's trying to convey some sort of symbology to the mind, because as you said, ancient Kemetic people, hieroglyphics, everything, they took it from nature. Everything was symbolic.
Right.
And that's the only way you had to, we ain't there yet.
Sure. Well, one of the points I want to make, and I see you, Sister Cap, is that I'm very specific, only because of time, for one reason, very specific. I'm talking about, and I want us to look at the fact that something was being avoided. Something that's right there, particularly if you go to the Cairo Museum, and there's a conscious effort to avoid that and to act like those Sinjar-loving brothers for them didn't exist, and they did. And in fact, they did hair and nails for a living. So stereotypes, but anyway. No, they did. They were the manicurists for the royal family, those two brothers. But you had your hand up there.
I think he raised an interesting point around it being like in ancient time and in traditional African culture and during that period of time, there was a need for more human beings to be on the earth need, not earth needed, but there was a need for more human beings, and that need no longer exists at all now. So that's a thought that I kind of think around there being an increase in homosexuality, the infestation that humanity is to the earth, and that not that we're more than capable of raising children and having science has done a lot of things for that reality where non-heteronormative relationships don't mean no kids. That's no longer the correlation, but to nature it is. So that's an interesting point to raise about the past, and I think this might be showing up again right now, and that's a topic I would like to talk about more.
Well, before we end this, if we have time, I want to talk about the increased homosexuality perspective. I want to make sure we get to that. Should have been up there maybe. There is an increase in homosexuality.
With everything then, the lack of need for humanity, for more humans too. If we add both.
Sure. She has two items. Well, that's what she heard. We put everybody's perspective up here.
What was the second thing?
She wanted to make sure that I want to make sure we put up there, but there's a concern about it among black folks about an increase in homosexuality, and she contextually brought in this issue around there being more need to reproduce. More focus.
Less of a need. That's what I'm saying. Less of a need.
Less of a need to reproduce. because it's so many people
Yeah, on plan.
on the planet. Okay. Next. Okay, these are images of same-gender loving people from the 1800s and 1900s. Some of these pictures are literally 100 years old. And the point of raising this real quickly is to show that same-gender loving people have always been part of the black community. And we don't even have enough room for all the images and the image proof. But black people, the farther back we go in the society, are more communal. The less communal we are in terms of our diversity as we go forward, because a lot of us are very much involved in an industrial strength level of assimilation interest and some other things. But these images are of same-gender loving folks since the 1800s up into the 1900s. Couples. And these are people that some of you in the room may recognize by name. Maybe you can tell us who some of them are, but somehow the people who don't have gray hair first to see who might know. Who is that? What was that? That's Bessie Smith. And she was a very famous and important blues singer back in the day. Same-gender loving woman. And she even talks about some of that in her lyrics. Who was that?
Bring it down or something?
Yes.
Just push this down?
Yeah. Okay, because of time, now somebody gets blurted out. Okay, that's Big Mama Thornton.
Okay.
And she was a very, very popular blues singer who unfortunately died very tragically because of stresses around her, how she was treated in some circles as a same-gender loving woman. And who is he? I mean, she. Nobody. I'll give you a hint. Very, very, one of the most famous black women comedians in history.
I got gray hair, so I shut up.
Tell us, brother, because of time.
Mom's Mabley.
Mom's Mabley. Now, who's heard of Mom's Mabley? You all heard of it, but you know that was Mom's Mabley off stage. Wow. Now, it was on stage. It was an act. They talk about that. Some man. She wasn't thinking about no man, but she was talking about a man in her and how he was no good and blah blah blah. It was all to make you laugh. She went on to a woman.
I just want to share in terms of Mom's Mabley. She, as you said, literally when she would get off stage, all her wardrobe was totally male. She would totally hang with jazz musicians and musicians, play poker's cards. She carried a piece all the time. She did not even associate, and because of her wealth and her popularity, she was completely accepted. Something I just wanted to mention earlier, wasn't up there, about internalized self-hatred and our need for assimilation that makes us faux homophobic. Because one thing I'm hopeful about, meaning that when, even with my family, I only use for example another family members I know, and even within the African Black Church, we will say maybe publicly and in family settings, homophobia is scandalous, but everyone has that relative that will come, and whether it's tolerated or not, will be maybe surfacely accepted, but it's still a form of acceptance and acknowledgement of it. And also within the African Black Church, particularly Christian Black Church, particularly when it comes to your minister of music or other aspects that are artistic and creative within the church, it's obvious that that person may be queer. Nothing is mentioned about it. It's tolerated. It's like, and the gospel will say that homosexuality is evil up until you want your choir to sound good, and then it is accepted. And I've seen that level of hypocrisy within the church. In regards, I just want to put out there, the need for white acceptance forces a lot of African Black folks to shun other Black folks who are gay and queer for the need of assimilational acceptance. I think that needs to be put there as well, and which is a form of all our other traumas too, that we have as a people. That keeps us, as you were saying, and that's why I appreciate this forum, that keeps us divided and really flexing our global economic and political power on this planet.
One of the things that we have to do and I won't be getting into that right now, but I just want to put it out there as a consideration, is that another thing that needs to occur for black people to become repaired, that's what the reparations, the first part of it really was repairing us, is that we have to stop letting whiteness be our frame of reference.
Yes. Yes.
We have to stop letting the pimp, whatever you want to call them, be our prism.
Yeah.
And that even has to do with language like lesbian, gay, queer, and et cetera, which you'll get into later. I want to put it out there because I don't want it to not to be missed that part of how we are repaired is that we reawaken to ourselves as black people, and that be our frame of reference. Because white frame of reference is like having fire as a frame of reference, and you got oil on your body. It's dangerous. It's not helpful to us. We have to, and for a lot of us, getting out of that box that you mentioned is an intentional act that we have to do, like brushing our teeth every day, or else we won't brush our teeth and our teeth will fall out. Our metaphoric teeth will fall out. These are modern images of well-known gender nuanced and gender-loving people that you may have heard of.
Did you define gender nuanced already? Did I miss it?
Okay, go on.
So gender nuance is an attempt to talk about gender expression outside of the transgender context. Black people have been expressing and experimenting with gender for a very, very long time. In addition to that, we live in a context where there is this quote-unquote hyper-masculine and reactions to trauma around identity of being male and female. And so gender nuance is to talk about how different black folks, like moms, Mabley, for instance, experiment with their gender outside of the transgender context. It's unfair to call Hatshepsut transgender when Hatshepsut wasn't around for that conversation.
So, I'm just trying to understand. I mean, to make a good point. But are you saying that they may be acting in a way that could be considered for people who use trans as a language?
Yes.
But they may not identify as trans, so you're using a different term because they may not identify with that terminology.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In addition, just want to put for reference point, even the term transgender is now considered an umbrella term to talk about everyone's various different interactions with how they portray gender. But this is a black intentionally context to challenge that. We are gender nuanced, gender variant.
Yeah, I just want to say, just to make sure that I'm kind of extending on what your explanation is, gender nuance is really an attempt to work outside of Eurocentric frames.
Exactly. Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, and we haven't constructed a language that was made out of African cultural concepts. So in the meantime, gender nuance is the phrase, is the word we use.
And it's described as such, like when you say it, it's like I'm putting a black lens on African, I don't know, on it.
I mean, if we intentionally claim it, like we have to all come together. I know one group, for instance, is using gender variant as an option, but and that is an intentionally black option, but it's not widely publicized and known yet because the power of white supremacy and white gayness is just so
But it's the same as
right.
the same with like SGL, like it's intentional.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Most of these sexual, bisexual, homosexual, heterosexual, are German. Heterosexual, you've heard of those people, heterosexual. All three of those terms are German. They came from Germany.
Oh, wow.
None of those terms would have come from our ancestors. Matter of fact, there's no term for either from all three in most African languages. Because of more of a fluid perspective of nature and life and possibility among the human experience. All this cookie cutter stuff has to do with some other people who have control issues and who want to put folks in boxes. But we are bigger than those boxes. That's why we don't use queer and all them things, because those are British, white, oppressive clothing that is fixating our breathing, and we're trying to breathe. Okay, but okay, I heard these folks, and she was just thrown out the closet. I heard about it.
He said thrown out the closet.
Well, both of them were thrown because they didn't say it themselves, but it's true. Next.
Oh, true.
And these are images of same-gender people from the continent. This couple, and they're dressed in their indigenous clothing, and they're same-gender people and part of an African family and community. Next. And see, as I mentioned earlier, because white gays, as they call themselves, are powerful and are part of the white supremacist hegemony, and people like myself and others who have a whole other perspective on this don't have the kind of resources and machinery and ABC and CBS and L and all that kind of stuff to promote another paradigm. You don't know this paradigm exists. Just like you probably don't know some of these people existed before most of you were born. So sexual loving people outside of the LGBTQ white supremacist paradigm have already been around and still around, and it's a whole way of being consideration outside of that gets no press because it's better that you think white. Including when it comes to this queer stuff. So
I'll read it.
this is
Wait. Who knows who this is first?
It says.
I mean, y'all know what she sung?
She's a musician.
Because a lot of y'all have a favorite movie called Love and Basketball. But Michelle said, gay life, the whole gay lifestyle is performed off of white gay male aesthetic. Now that ain't my vibe, it just bothers me, period. That white gay males define how a lot of homosexuals or quote unquote lesbians see themselves. Queer, ? I'm not feeling that. I can't embrace that. I can't embrace lesbian either. I hate the way the word sounds. It's not an attractive word. It's hard being whatever you want to call it when white people have their agenda and expect you just to represent their agenda.
I like how you did that like a
Hey, that was real poetic.
Same thing.
But she said that. It didn't make the cover of New York Times or The Advocate, which is the white supremacist gay national newspaper. But she said it. And she was even more famous when she said it. Next. And this is a young woman from, I didn't give her permission to use her picture, so I didn't use it. But this is a young woman who went to UCLA who wrote us and expressed this.
The term same-gender loving, SGL, is a wonderful, refreshing phrase that I completely embrace. As a young black woman who loves women, I've never been too fond of the terms gay and or lesbian, mostly because I don't like the sound and origin of the words. I found out that the term gay was coined by a homosexual white man. I cannot and will not identify with it. I am not from Greece, nor am I white, so for me, lesbian holds no significant meaning to me as a woman of African descent.
So there's this reality out here that if we don't have this conversation as black people, you think RuPaul represents everybody.
Right.
And we're going to talk about some of that in a moment. And this is a conversation, you'll be reading this, please, but this is Huey P. Newton and James Baldwin, who were homies. And there's a lot about Huey Newton in terms of how progressive he was regarding black diversity. A lot of people don't know about that either, but let's see what James said.
The word gay has always rubbed me the wrong way. I never understood exactly what is meant by it. I don't want to sound distant or patronizing because I don't really feel that. I simply feel it's a world that has little to do with me and with me where I did my growing up. I was never at home in it.
And there are lots of same-gender loving and bisexual black people who feel that way, but they're drowned out by a larger, more relentless narrative that unfortunately black people think is everybody's narrative because we haven't had these conversations. Now, black people are considered by some, very ignorantly, as the poster children for so-called homophobia. Now, real quickly, I'm going to tell you why I say so-called homophobia. And I won't have time to get into this right now in terms of any feedback, but I will later if we have time. But among black people, sometimes what's called homophobia is, where's the black man at ophobia? Sometimes it's just, what's wrong with your ass ophobia? Sometimes it's, I want to see some strong brothers somewhere ophobia. I mean, that's what's going on with some of us, because black men have had experience in this country that has been quite traumatizing. And there's concern about the state of black men, and it's a legitimate concern. But because we haven't had black conversations about that concern, when somebody says, wait a minute now, I don't know if I like that my son might be a woman, I need some men somewhere. It's simply called homophobia. Yeah. Instead of creating a dialect based on a legitimate perspective, based on the context of being black in the United States of America, in a colonized context. So But when it comes to people who were trying to kill homosexuals and destroy homosexuals in this community, the leaders are not black.
Thank you.
None of them are black. These are the primary leaders. Jerry Falwell. Who was that? J. Edgar Hoover. Who had a lot of nerves with all the pumps in his closet. But anyway, who was that? Scott Lively. You might not have heard of Scott Lively, but you have heard of the Kill the Gays bill in Uganda, so-called Uganda. I still call it Buganda. Well, he's the author of it.
Wow.
And almost all that anti-homosexual reactionary behavior is happening on the continent. I've actually researched and been there, so this is not just me talking. He and people like him, he's a white reverend from the United States, are behind it. He helped to fund and inspire the so-called Kill the Gay bill in Buganda. Him. Scott Lively. Like I said, do your own research.
I want to add to that real quickly. Early part of last year, if anyone heard about gays, quote unquote, disappearing in Russia and being in concentration camps and gays not living in that country at all, he's also behind and orchestrated that particular endeavor as well.
Matter of fact, this picture's from Russia. He was doing his thing in Russia in this picture. Wow. And some of you who are my age and older, maybe slightly younger, might remember who, the orange juice woman. What's her name? Anita Bryant. Anita Bryant, who used to be seen as a wholesome, like poster child white woman with orange juice. Put that orange juice on and said, look, you faggots, get out of my face. Because she was upset about homosexuality and went on a rampage in this country against it, sometimes joining him. And they created the context that led to some overt anti-homosexual attitudes on a media level. It was always there, particularly in police departments and other places, like the so-called Stonewall, which some of you guys have heard of, which really people of African descent dealing with police brutality. Again, do your own research. When you do your own research and you see the two popular films about Stonewall, they have white men, a white blonde on the cover of the film promotion, and it's about a white blonde. It's like Superman and Batman. It didn't happen, doesn't exist. It was a Puerto Rican and black scholar that was inspired by police brutality when they were being battered in a bar for both being black and Latino, and Afro-Latino, and homosexual and trans people. As white people take, what's that word they use? The white people taking stuff from us, what's that word?
Appropriate.
They appropriate everything, they appropriated Stonewall, and now they got everybody thinking that Stonewall is some white gay movement. And that's not true. And those rainbow colors that are now known as white gay colors started off with Jesse Jackson and Rainbow Push.
Yeah, it is.
And pride came from black pride.
That's the craziest part.
Black people were the first people to use pride as a public collective statement to galvanize us and to celebrate who we are and to defend ourselves. But y'all don't know y'all history, so y'all think Ellen did. Maybe. I'm using Ellen as a metaphor. White homosexuals. And this is white homosexual iconography. Duke has Baltimore's Out Loud paper, which has that triangle in it. Now, who, without gray hair, I know you know, probably was at the man's house. But what's this triangle from? Okay, because of time, somebody tell us. Real quick.
Holocaust.
Okay, thank you, Shaman. You want to tell me real quick?
Real quick, the pink triangle was a symbol used for Holocaust victims, specifically for Jews who were identified as homosexual. They were separated specifically because of their sexuality. They had a upwards triangle that was pink, and that was how they were used, particularly in gas chambers as well. But they were just tortured in a separate chamber specifically because of their sexuality. And so part of the white gay movement was repurposing that particular symbology for their movement.
Their history, their culture, their ethos. That's what you're supposed to do when you want to be free, and you want your people to have enough audacity to act like they want to be free. That's why we separate. We walk outside of white paradigms because they don't make us want to be free. They make us want to be white, and that ain't freedom. And there's a rainbow again, and this guy named Gilbert Baker created this rainbow idea as supposedly the gay flag. It's important to mention real quickly that during the time that Baker made this flag, white gay establishments, and I call them gay, I don't call black people gay, but I call them gay, Black people were not allowed in their bars and clubs, or had to have all kinds of ID.
Still not.
And there was a time, for example, in the 80s where black people wore Converse. Some of y'all may have heard of All-Star. Converse. Well, I don't know what y'all wear now. But anyway. Okay, well, I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, let's focus because of time. People know.
Amen.
Thank you, fam.
The white gay folks would have on their bar doors no Converse, and now they have in Atlanta, for example, no hoodies. So they still being white. Anyway, and some of you who hang around so-called gay circles, might have heard Lambda Rising, Lambda Legal, Lambda whatever. Well, Lambda is a Greek alphabet that's paying homage to the apprenticeship system in ancient Greece. But without going into all of that, the bottom line is that white people understand the importance of symbology and how it affirms them and makes you affirm them, thinking you're affirming yourself. Those people that I showed you earlier, particularly way back in Kemet, affirm you more than this stuff affirms you. But you got black people with rainbow hats, draws, everything, and proud, they say. And some people even run around with this pink triangle, not even knowing that is Hitler's architecture. Next.
You're gonna make me have to go back and delete all my social media posts trying to be a good ally. I gotta delete everything.
Well, you should. Delete that in the back real quick.
I gotta apologize.
People dawned in their pride. I mean, is it their fault? I mean, is it,
I'm not,
I mean, that's a question I would.
okay.
Is it their fault?
That's a good question. I'm not doing fault.
Want to do that?
I'm not doing fault. People do what they know. And our job is to make sure they know something else.
But should we bash them as you talk about this other thing that they could know? Because that's what I'm hearing.
You hearing bash? I'm bashing colonialism.
No doubt.
I'm bashing the impact of us not knowing who we are, which has been devastating. I'm bashing that we don't know who we are, and some of us are adamant, proud, and have an attitude not knowing who we are. And
But you call Hotep when you try to tell them too, though.
Okay,
We
let's see.
haven't talked about that.
Well, yeah, see. That's another topic.
But I would.
Even the word Hotep, using the word.
If they do that, it's like about the individual, not about them being colonized. That's where it makes.
Well, we're almost finished with this.
Feel away.
Let me get through this so we can get to this conversation part. But I hear you. But I want to make it clear that I am against colonization of black people because it has been extremely destructive and it still is, and it's hurting us more than we even allow ourselves to even ponder. It's one of the reasons why we have a difficult time having this conversation and we waited to 2020, though it should have been happening in 1820, is because of the impact of white supremacy and how disruptive it is to our mental health. And I'm real bothered by that phenomenon. Moonlight, you've heard of that film, where they well, this was a black film, made about a black experience, but white folks put their triangle in the middle of the advertising.
Oh no.
I didn't even notice that.
Well, and see, this is what I'm saying. Like, they get us because a lot of us don't know this
I
stuff.
thought that was like some artistic
I did too.
That's a pink triangle.
Yeah.
Show them the cover of Out Loud, please, so they can see this. See, I don't want to focus on them that much, but they don't play. They're very perpetually strategic and perpetually promoting themselves, perpetually marginalizing any idea of you learning to love yourself in your own image.
Wow.
Next. This is the Baba Visi. It's a African, Isabidi, West African influence symbol that embodies symbolically same-gender loving Africans, trans-Africans, the whole spectrum. It's called the Baba Visi. We're not going to get into it in the depth yet, but just want you to know that there are symbols that affirm us on planet Earth and been here for a while, but because that our agenda or our narrative is marginalized, you didn't know that, but it's true.
What's it called? How do you pronounce it again?
Baba Visi, B-A-W-A-V-I-S-I.
Actually, family who I asked for real quick, Charlie, I believe there's some Baba VC stickers in that cubby hole next to you. Yeah, if you could just pass them around.
And
people can have
explain
them.
once again the significance of that, please, brother.
So, in specifics, as we recognize how white people have come to affirm themselves in the context of sexuality and gender affirmation, they have their own symbology. We found it important in our work in the curriculum of critical thinking and cultural affirmation that Black people need their own symbology in order to activate powers of healthy self-concept, activate powers of unity. I actually do a workshop. I encourage all of you all to come. I do a workshop on symbology alone, about the impact symbols have on the ability for a particular community to commune together. Right. And so the Bible BC is an attempt to showcase how Black people can come together under their own image, with their own history and context, to affirm their selves as persons and people. So with that being said, Bible BC stickers are being passed around for anyone who wants to identify or share with others who identify with this particular concept.
Okay, I'm trying to make this real quick because this can get out of hand.
It can get ugly.
What attributes do these people have in common?
They're Black. Black and queer, or not, Black and same as 11.
Okay.
Wait.
No demerits for that. But anyway.
I'm sorry, one second. Someone has a magazine floating around called Gay Parent. Could they pass that up front, please?
Okay, real quick.
I got it.
Wait. I bet you got it. But anyway.
I got it. They made the white people. Got it.
Every Black celebrity who is same-gender loving, who has a piece of real estate, meaning perpetually in your face in the media context, have a white partner. All without exception.
That's right.
All of them. Without exception. So again, because there's not much time to get into it, these are not the media is not this neutral landscape that just do stuff. Everything they do is strategic and intentional, as important. For example, on CNN, and I'm gonna say this quick, y'all do your own research. It has 3 men who have their own show. What do those 3 men have in common? All 3 of them. The same thing. Okay, next thing. And there's no such thing as an accidental pattern.
True that.
There's no such thing as an accidental pattern. If it's a pattern, it ain't accidental. It's intentional. So just keep that in mind as you come out of your box, out of your trance.
And it's a continued endeavor. I mean, even in all of their marketing approaches, everything that is marketed related to us.
And this is true for heterosexual Black people too.
This is true for heterosexuals as well. The representation, symbology again of Black people loving Black people is becoming increasingly
There's a
scarce.
vicious attack on Black love.
Vicious. Yes, it is.
And we can't fall for it, y'all. Next. Okay, images that may alarm Black people. That's what this is called. Now, why would these images alarm Black people?
They challenge our black ideas about sexuality.
In the middle of this,
Oh, I said.
Real quick, so we can move.
That's Michael B. Jordan.
This is Michael B. Jordan. What do you call him?
Skinny pants.
The skinny pants.
Can I just repeat what she said?
Yes,
She was answering you, Cleo, but it was round out.
I said it challenges our whack idea about black masculinity.
Our whack idea? I like you.
Well, some people think it's whack, some people don't. I mean, like I said, we want to keep all perspectives in this room and actually engage them. Some people don't think it's whack. Some people think that this is whack. That these men just, after making $1 gazillion, white folks get them all these big awards, and they were celebrating with each other. Did anybody have a sex here? It's not a sex picture, but people are losing their minds in our community. Not everybody, but a lot of people over these pictures. In this picture right here, people thought he was putting his head down to do something else. You know? And it ain't true.
Would you think their thinking comes from their belief?
I think
you said what people say in their mind, what they're thinking. Do you think it comes from their belief?
Could I ask? I think white supremacy is a part of that belief, though. I think when someone asks that question, immediately they go to a religious context. But again, we have to reframe and talk about the boxes that we've been put in a colonized context. Our belief is white. Our belief is white systems of gender and sexuality. Our belief is capitalism. These are our beliefs, right? And so we have to start deconstructing
That's your
that.
perception. My perception is different. Okay, so you're talking about what you believe, what you think. Okay.
And how we're raised,
Let's move.
raise our
I don't want us to miss any time to have a conversation. So.
What you think. Okay.
The thing that all of us have to understand that when you're in a particular box, when I say box, I mean culture, that all cultures are based on principles or philosophical concepts. And those philosophical concepts or principles are what drives your belief system. Because what you believe is based on the culture.
That's right.
And the culture is based on certain principles that govern that culture or that drives that culture in a particular direction. Your belief system, which is derived from the philosophical principles of the culture, it impacts your perspective or how you view life, how you look at life.
That's right.
That's the framework. And none of us can get out of it just like that.
Your
You
perception.
had to, oh, man,
That's your perception. You can't tell me what I'm thinking.
Listen, I'm not trying to argue with you
I'm not arguing
about
with
what
you.
you
You
believe.
cannot tell me that.
Quick.
Thanks,
That's your
y'all. Let's
opinion.
go forward. But
That's your opinion.
one thing that's not an opinion is that most people in this room cannot break out into Swahili even at gunpoint. I said most people could not break out into Swahili or any African or continental language at gunpoint because you don't know it. And your beliefs are co-framed by your language system.
That's right.
And white supremacy is a language, English is an anti-black, and I can prove it, language system that some of us are so entrenched in without critique that we think it is our beliefs. And it's really carrying somebody else's water.
Yeah, I'd like to share something that really hits home for me.
And you're gonna do it quick,
I
man.
have two. I have twin sons. They're 6 years old. Don't look at the gray hair. Don't hate. And every day when I take them to school, I kiss them on their forehead and I kiss them on the lips. Recently, black folk and a few white folks started looking at me cockeyed by seeing me kiss my 6-year-old twin sons on the lips as I part with them. And I know what they're thinking. Somehow either something's wrong with me or I'm going to make my twin sons same gender loving, gay in the future. And that is so offensive. What I share with my children, what I did not receive as a child, knowing emphatically, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that their father loves them to the core. Every time I look at them, their blessed black skin, I want to inhale them and spread love into them. So looking at those images, and I also teach high school, when the young brothers get turned up, when they win a game or get a passing grade, they go straight up, yo, dummy, yo, the J-Dog, come here, boy! They hug and embrace and everything else. And I think it's beautiful. So I just want to share, too, that will impact us as a people. How do you think that a father kissing his own child?
Exactly, as a people. Don't have nothing to do with what culture you are as a people.
No, ma'am, I completely and lovingly disagree with you.
Okay, but let's lovingly stop this right now and continue. Something lovely is going to occur.
I don't agree at all.
But anyway, I just want us to look at how we think and how we are. Hold on a second.
I go.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
I just want us to look at what we have visceral, which means physical and emotional reactions to, and at least consider why we may be having them or that we are having them. Because folks lost their minds and wrote all kinds of books and narratives regarding what they supposedly was. Well, he ain't acting like, what was his name in the Black Panther?
Killmonger.
This ain't Killmonger-ish.
That's so funny. I didn't even know what I was looking at.
They prefer that he's in what I call industrial strength man drag. With all the, all that stuff. Okay, next.
I thought that was like a boy group.
Next.
Lead singer.
Why are we so concerned about all of this emasculation issue? Because we've been emasculated. It ain't irrational. See that other frame of reference that a lot of us run behind, queer, blah, blah, blah? They don't give a damn about this. It's not in their lens
That's right.
to address the reverberations of this. Matter of fact, some of them was doing this to us. So it doesn't make any sense for us to have that as our frame of reference as black people in terms of referencing ourselves.
Come on now.
It don't make no sense at all. But and what happened with a lot of gayified is the word I use, I don't mean to offend, but a lot of gayified black people is that they'll call other black people homophobic themselves because they don't have no consideration of these cause and effect phenomena.
That's real.
They don't look at it, black people's experience as human beings who have had a historical experience and a contemporary experience that's abusive and emasculating. And they'll jump up, well, you just homophobic, and then try to shut you down.
That's what I'm talking about.
And not even allow there to be a conversation that could be helpful and transformative about these issues.
Blacks together. That's what I'm talking about.
But this is one of the reasons why
Of a black struggle.
that when those two brothers are hugging, etc., why we have something that goes beyond so-called homophobia is because we're still living with the DNA of trauma. These experiences in our bodies unarticulated.
Yeah.
So when something is unarticulated, it's often running you instead of you running yourself.
That's right.
And if we don't have these conversations, it's going to keep running you, which is what occurs all the time.
Are you going to talk? I got a question. I have to say now.
Yes,
Can I say something? The other thing that I think is important that gets left out of the conversation is also the rape of black men.
Absolutely.
Signed by white folks,
Absolutely.
black gays. We talk about other rapes, but we never talk about the. I don't know whether buck breaking is a myth, but I do know that the rapes and
Buck breaking is a myth.
Okay.
I mean, homosexual buck breaking is a myth.
On the plantation.
Okay.
You gotta go with the whole thing now.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a myth out there, particularly among blackity black, Pan-Africanist types of people, and it's not true.
Okay.
That white folks had homosexual enforcement camps.
Okay.
That they brought black men to rape them and to buck break them by raping them sexually. Never happened.
Yeah.
People say it with their mouth, all in mics, and write it down and argue with you. And people in our community, because we haven't had conversations about this and are uncomfortable with homosexuality or don't like it, will jump all on board. Yeah, that's right. And first of all, what people don't understand, there's a whole lot of reasons why it's illogical, but this is a historically very anti-homosexual society. Back then, it was even more anti-homosexual. And it was based on King James and all kinds of other stuff, and the Victorian era influence on the people that started this country. They weren't about to go do no homosexuality publicly for everybody to rape some black men. I mean, it just don't make no sense historically and culturally. But a lot of us don't know our history. We're too traumatized to look at cause and effect and logic sometimes. And we think something's wrong with homosexuality because of our own rape or our own tendencies or whatever's going on, or some real analysis that we don't have enough conversation to actually unpack this whole thing. But that didn't happen.
For clarity, rape of black males did happen on these things, but it was not a homosexual agenda.
Rape of black men.
It wasn't a regime.
It still
kind of
happens.
thing.
It wasn't a means to break people.
What was the purpose?
It was the same reason that rape happens. The same reason that rape happens today. It's about power. It's about stealing. It is about criminal activity.
Some of these men were raped. I mean, their genitals were removed and put in their mouth. So that has sexual rape violation connotation.
So have you heard of the term homoeroticism? Okay.
Yes.
I'm learning, y'all. I'm just trying to ask.
Don't worry. I mean,
let's move on.
Last thing I'll add, there's video at least 2 years ago of a white cop talking about how erotic it is for him to be in positions of power whenever it comes to black males. And handcuffing them and abusing them. So this is a power play in context.
See, this kind of stuff, and I'm trying to stay calm here because it's so painful. The things that we're going through that's hurting us, that we don't have to go through when we attend to each other, needs to be understood and discussed, because black people are going through some horrendous stuff. I mean, not only was there's this cop, and I used to work in law enforcement myself in Los Angeles, there's a whole lot of raping of black people. There was a cop, I forgot his name now, who did go to jail, who was raping black women.
Oh, in Oklahoma.
Yeah, and he's the one that got caught. You know, he's the one that got caught. And I heard about Ed Buck in Los Angeles, who had 2 black corpses in his house and was at home chilling and was not concerned about going to jail. And his community, the LGBTQs, weren't for it. So we got to come to each other's attention. Right. Because this conversation, like Duke said earlier, it's not about trying to convince you of anything except to be more practical and rational and functional when it comes to working with black people and building community with black people, because we need each other.
That's right.
And a lot of us are messed up over these issues, and some of that concern is legitimate and some of it is reactionary. And it's because of this too. This happened. All these people were dead, murdered by cops, and that's not even a full list. So we're still doing things that got people mad about a compromised black male. The concept or the image of a gender or sexuality compromised black male, because how are you going to step up like that when we're going through this? I mean, that's the perspective of some of us. It's not really a correlation, but that's people's perspective. Next. As I said, we have to start having conversations about this stuff, because these people are all young, they're all dead, and they all killed themselves because they didn't have safe space in their family. And some of these are babies. This young man, Nigel, was in the media a lot recently, who killed himself. But we don't got time for the friction and the fighting. We don't. I mean, these are just the ones we know about, that you know about. I've been working in mental health for years. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I know legions of people who are dead or disfigured because they didn't have a safe place from their perspective right here. And frankly, I know heterosexual men who feel like they didn't have a safe space here, and black women who felt the same way, who went after Biff and Buffy because they don't feel safe here. And we call them names and coons and stuff, which creates more friction and more trauma. We got to stop re-traumatizing black people. We got to start doing what I call trauma deflection and not recreate trauma, because it's already there. That's why I said earlier, if trauma caused homosexuality, all you have to do is go get your same gender loving partner and go home. Because I'm telling you, as somebody who works in behavioral health, the trauma goes all across the spectrum. And I got emotional because you might not have known it, but I know they're all dead. And I knew some of these people. And this sister here, she was from Vallejo, California. She had, now this is another issue which you don't have time to get into, but it's still a consequence of the lack of black support. She had support from her parents. Her parents loved her and supported her. But her community was so messed up. I'm not talking about the black community at large now, but her community in terms of her sexuality was so in disarray and such an unsafe place for her emotionally that it was very difficult for her to just be alive, not having a place to be proud at. And the lack of pride is based on the lack of safe space. So we have to create that. I didn't mean to get emotional, y'all. But just remember, this is a transgender young person who killed themselves, female to male, transgender. This baby killed himself. He killed himself. He killed himself. She killed herself. They all killed themselves because it was difficult to be in their bodies while being black, including among black people.
I want to add, I don't know if you put this particularly in the slide, but another challenge that we face when we don't deal with this is we train black people to become white supremacist advocates. When they have become traumatized inside of the black community, inside of a world that is anti-black, they internalize that narrative and they go twice as hard.
They go so hard.
Twice as hard in order to destroy their own community. It is why so many argue and believe with all their being that the black community is the most homophobic, even when the gay rights movement is birthed because of white homophobia. Like, and it's still powered and still controlled because of the same paradigm. So we again, as he stated, we have work to do, and if you don't, we're either dealing with this, or we're dealing with some angry queer people, queer identified, Lee Daniels, and whoever else.
And for a lot of these people, some of them who I've met, their anti-black behavioral norms are unconscious. They're too disoriented and caught up in whiteness as a norm and normalize anti-blackness as a way of seeing the world. They don't even realize the damage that they're doing. But everybody, not everybody, a lot of people I've met in my life who've been over there because of proper engagement have transformed. And that transformation does not include trauma, name calling, dismissiveness, hateful talk, and talk that really clearly implies that you're dismissing them. That doesn't heal people. You can't anger nobody and force somebody into making any kind of decisions. It don't work.
That's right.
So we have to start doing our work in ways that are deflecting of trauma and affirming of black people, no matter what you believe. Because see, again, I ain't trying to get you to jump on no bandwagon, but I'm gonna get you to be more functional in terms of how you work and deal with black people. Because if you think, for example, like I told some of these so-called Pan-Africanist people, not all of them, I'm not talking all of them, some. Okay, you think that homosexuals are the result of trauma. Then okay, let's test your theory and create a less traumatized community and see what happens. Instead of going, instead of getting on people's case and all this stuff you talking about how traumatized are and they're re-traumatized with your rhetorical BS, let's work together and build a less traumatized community and see if the homosexual, with the sister in the back talking about all these new homosexuals coming, maybe they may stop coming if you treat them right. I'm not saying that's true or not. I'm just saying, based on their theory, be more decent and see what happens. I think that's the last slide. Thank y'all for listening to that and dealing with my
At the front, just real quick, we're still going to have a moment, but we're going to go over things. At the front, our brother Reginald had a sign-in tablet. If you did not, please sign in with us at the Amasi Center. We do monthly meetings and gatherings and groups. Again, thank you so much, LBS, for inviting me to this part. I know.
Okay.
You can just put the camera.
Thank you, folks.
But we do have some other things to go over. I do remember some things from the list being that let's do some questions now. You think questions?
No, that's what
all right, let's do this. So, is homosexuality un-African? Yes or no?
That's him. That's his question.
That's my question.
Post-test.
Post-test.
Homosexuality.
That's a quiz, I got it.
You had something.
Any feedback, questions, revelations, challenges? I'm gonna get to you, brother, but I want to make sure we hear from people that haven't spoke yet first.
So yeah, so I think about this in the context of some things I see in my family, and similar to the comment that was said earlier, some of the things that we see we call homophobia may be more nuanced in how they reflect themselves. So similar to the comments made earlier, if there's someone in the family, they come to Thanksgiving dinner, they bring a dish, they come to Big Mama's funeral or her birthday, and they're part of the community, they can bring someone of the same gender to the cookout. It's not that big a deal. But I think there's some people who see the very act of same-gender love as a reflection of what has become a stereotypical white vision of the gay experience, which is consumerist and hedonistic, right? And some people conflate those two. Obviously it's hypocritical because the consumerism and hedonism of straight men can oftentimes be ignored. But people assume that if you are having same-gender love, that reflects the fact that you don't want to be part of the black community no more. You want to be part of this weird consumerist hedonistic experience. And it makes me think a lot about Eurocentric thought systems being internalized, this is the dichotomous thought systems of European peoples. That, again, you can either be part of this mythical gay experience or the black experience, as opposed to seeing it as something more diurnal or nuanced in that. But I guess the question is, like, you know, that notion of diurnal thought in the African thought system. Can you talk more about, I guess, specifics around the box you talk about, Eurocentric? What are some of the techniques and characteristics of Eurocentric thought that are conditioning some of our folks to have some of these fears that maybe we can deconstructively understand more how those technologies and systems work?
So something that I do with my students is I ask this question. I ask, if you had to choose between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, who was more masculine? Who would you say? Who would you say? And yeah. And so you see the mix. You see a mix, right? So I heard some people clearly say Malcolm X, and I saw other people shaking their head like, no, that's not a question. Like, that's not a real thing. And what I express to my students is that we know that there shouldn't be an answer to that question, because both of them were just men. Both of them were masculine men. Both of them did what was necessary for their community in the ways that they saw fit. However, because we live in this particular societal and context, there absolutely is an answer, right? If we ask that question. And the reason why is because we've associated so many different human traits to things like femininity and masculinity, right? And so as Dr. Monago stated earlier, to hug your child, to want to be hugged and nurtured, it's not a feminine trait, that's a human trait. But we live in a society that has successfully boxed these particular categories, and in addition to boxing them, said that one of them was worse, right? The attack on black male masculinity and the quote-unquote emasculation of black men is only successful because we've already accepted and believe that women are inferior, right? And so until when we start to really diagnose how we interact with how we believe each other, how we speak, how we talk, how we address these isms, then we won't. I hope I'm answering to that effect. And the other thing to note is that white supremacist myth is malleable, right? It's not a static system, right? Like the ways that they operate years ago, they changed.
Oh yeah,
they changed with the times, right? And so it is about consistently learning about how to defend yourself. There needs to be an intentional class, if you will, on how to deal with it. Yes.
I just had a question about like black people, I guess, who identify as gay or homosexual, using those kind of Eurocentric frames. When I find myself in spaces with black folks like that, it's like either a mix of black people that are like, I'm black, or other folks that are like, they only speak the language of the oppressor. They only speak the European language. And so what I find myself doing is being enemies with black people that doesn't make sense to be enemies with. And so what I'm curious about is from y'all's perspective, what do you feel is the most effective to deal with black folks in that context when they're having those kind of like identity quakes, when they're trying to like transition from talking how white people talk to having a black perspective on their sexuality and gender?
I can answer that question from personal experience, lots of it. What I've experienced in my life and time is that just being pro-black is offensive to people. I'm talking about black people now. I want to be real clear. I ain't talking about white people. When I get to them, I'll announce it white people time or something, which is probably not going to happen. But I'm talking about black people now. The majority of the pushback I've ever experienced was from black people, and have gotten a whole lot of pushback from who I call gayified black people, or black people caught up in the LGBTQ paradigm. And what I attempt to do, and I'm not always successful, but I have been successful, is understanding that they're going through this anti-black breakdown, as that I keep my body language neutral and not combative. I mean, I'm already a dark-skinned black man with broad shoulders. I'm already mad even if I'm eating a lollipop. I'm mad. I'm angry. You know, you're just angry no matter what you do. So I put the lollipop down, and then I make sure that my body language is
neutral.
And I ask questions with a non-threatening, to the extent that I can do it, demeanor, like, you know, what are you upset about? And I'm not asking that to attack you. I'm asking that because I want to get it, because I don't get it, because I'm just eating a lollipop, and I don't know why you're so upset. And I think it's going to be helpful to take it out of the abstract and, you know, what's going on, which is a different approach. Because what occurs often, if you don't take that kind of stance, is homophobic accusations, hotep accusations. And I usually look forward to alerting people who do that, say that, how ridiculous it is to compliment somebody, which is hotep as a compliment, as you attempt to defile them, which is a sign of not knowing your history in progress. But it's important, again, to go back to the non-re-traumatization consideration. Because people want to have conversations, believe it or not. They really want to get stuff off their chest. They really want to express things. And sometimes we are in what I call the white supremacy trauma trance, where we're in that box that he mentioned, and that's our frame of reference linguistically and everything else, and we're very defensive and anti-black. But none of that is intentional. That's why when you ask the question, you know, why? What's going on? Sometimes they have never even had the conversation before, and they come out of a trance a little bit because you provided respectful space to have a conversation. But you got to make them stick to the question, though, because sometimes people want to vent and go all over the place because they're not used to a rational conversation. So you have to keep it to me and say, "Watch you motherfucker, shut the fuck up." You know, you can't have that on your face. You know? You can't. You know, you gotta stay calm because you already got the intelligence and the equipment and everything else to do it all. I don't know because I haven't been there to see if you be like rolling your eyes. You know what I'm saying? They get on your damn nerves. Because if you roll your eyes like these motherfuckers, you know, if you're doing all of that, it ain't gonna work. And sometimes not doing that and doing some things I'm talking about creates an unusual dialogue that could create transformation that's not really occurred before. So it's all in your demeanor when you're black. I think when you're black male or sisters in many cases, because some of us are dealing with some of us are mad at black people. Some of us are tired of black people's shit. I'm not saying I am. I'm saying that's our mentality. Some of us, what'd you say, Breon? Some of us are. I'm just messing with you. Don't think about the art district stuff you've been through. But anyway, you know, some of us just, and we need to be, I'm going to close this long thing by saying that we need to be strategic conduits for transformation. That needs to always be our agenda, no matter how much more this is all. We need to be conduits, strategic conduits for transformation in terms of how we interact with each other as black people. Because everybody's mad. They're mad at the wrong people, unfortunately. You know, like the other day, I'm gonna shut up for that. I know I'm going on, dude. But the other day, for example, I heard again some black people say, "Black people are our worst enemies." You've heard that before, right? And I go, "What's your name?" John Johnson. I said, "No, we're not our worst enemy. Your name is John Johnson. That's who named you that as your worst enemy." And you can't even speak nothing else but John Johnson's language. Who did that is your worst enemy. And black people didn't do that. And often, particularly when I'm calm when I do it, they go, "Damn, I didn't think that Sally Mae was part of the problem." Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Sally Mae, you have that name Sally Mae because of what your worst enemy did. So I say that not just to run my mouth, but to give examples of countering white supremacist norms, countering anti-black white supremacist ways of viewing the world. We got to do that, or else we won't win this battle.
Back to his question about the African thing. Say that question again.
I said homosexuality un-African.
It's un-African? What do you mean by that? Un-African?
I mean, did it not exist pre-colonization? Is it not part of the culture?
Well, at this particular moment, for me, my opinion, it's the wrong question to ask, because the question should be more like, is your behavior individually or collectively? Because he's talking about only individual, he's talking about group behaviors. And the question should be more like, is the behavior or behaviors conducive to good physical or mental or spiritual health? Not that, am I African or not African? Because that's kind of ambiguous. You know, you want something more concrete. Are my behaviors conducive right now, individually and collectively as part of the group, physically, mentally, and spiritually? And the other thing you creating in this room right at this particular moment that I think you're conscious of, and it's intended, you create, in psychological terms, we call it dissonance.
Yes.
And you want dissonance because that's the beginning when people begin to think and change.
That's right.
In this particular room, we all right now at different degrees of psychological growth and consciousness. But somebody could walk out this room right now and break down and start crying when they get to their car. I've seen that. Somebody in this room could start breaking down, crying, or going through some changes right here in this room. But they should be cognizant that when you have these conversations, because you're talking about trauma, and as you said, historically, all of us carried in our genetics right now at this particular moment, and to different degrees, depending on our place and station where our ancestors were stationed at. And at some point, because of these kinds of conversations, if you go to more than one of these kind of talks, you're going to begin to change. You're going to begin to see more of what's being talked about in this room. It's going to come to you. Because spiritually, the divine will bring it to you. Because you're at that point now where you're not just sitting home looking at comedy capers or Jeffersons or something like that. You're dealing with something that's dealing with your identity. Because that brother went profound just now. And as he said from the beginning, we are socialistic as a group of people. That's a traditional African culture that we come out of. We move as a group. And our ethos simply means our emotional content, because we come down the same historical line, trajectory. So we think alike to some degree. We feel alike to some degree. So we have a similar worldview, and that's what he's talking about right now. He's explicating for us.
I saw one hand in the back, and then we'll come back up here.
You mentioned something, strategic confidence. And I like that. I think we do have to be conduits, and a conduit is a channel. And so, in order to create change, we kind of have to allow things to come to us. We have to accept what we have. We have to accept what's present. I feel like there's a lack of acceptance within our community, maybe even within ourselves. I don't have the full answer, but I feel like we need to accept people for what they are and what they present when we meet them. That's the only way to to talk to them, to get them to change, to create change, that we have to meet them where they are. And a lot of times we don't. We immediately try to drag people from where they are and put them where we want them to be.
I want to put an addendum to that you may or may not agree with. Then I'm going to talk about something that I was mentioned earlier that connected to some of the things that Duke just said, but I don't recommend people accept anything. I recommend that you embrace interaction and dialogue about everything.
I don't mean to agree.
Oh, I'm not talking. No, I'm just saying that I know you know, but when people were accept, they assume that you want me to just accept stuff that I don't accept. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just adding to it that I think that sometimes it's not an issue of us staying engaged, whether because there's acceptance or not. Let's be constructive. Let's make being constructive with each other intentional in terms of, and I'll kind of reiterate what I said earlier, but I want to mention something else that's in this mix in terms of homosexuality causing anxiety, and black people, including among African descendant people in the United States, being the last people to have this conversation, because people in Africa know places are having these conversations. We're one of the last groups to have it. Is that there's molestation that has happened. There's rape that has happened. Not only the one that we hear about all the time, which is the rape of women, but as somebody already mentioned, the rape of men or boys, molestation of boys, and some of the hatred that's happening, which is differently from my perspective than what Duke said about it's a misdirected, another excuse to do something that's hating women. That's happening. But there's some people who have been raped and molested and had no place to go and resolve that, and who don't understand why it happened, and it was a homosexual rape, and they're mad at homosexuals because they were raped.
We never talk about that.
And there's people who have, I'm not saying no names, don't ask me, but there's some people who have given themselves some other name recognition who, you could be talking about a particular narrative of the assault of black men. We saw some pictures, though some of you didn't need no picture, that has been perpetual through Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, and be going on and on, that we are still reacting to in terms of what's happened to our men. Mm-hmm. So that's not, I mentioned that because it's important and it's relevant to us, and give you another reason to understand that the LGBTQ, all that queer stuff, they don't make room for this.
That at all.
And I don't need them to. See, I ain't mad at white people for loving themselves and defending themselves and do what they got to do. I just want us to do it. I ain't mad at them for do your white stuff, but don't mess with me. You need to stop messing with me. But I need all of us to defend us. I can't defend us by myself.
Absolutely.
But I just want to make us understand some other paradigm shifts outside of that realm, which is why we have to have our own paradigm that's responsive to our experience so we can heal.
So a couple of things. I really appreciate this conversation. It's very timely for me. I work in a nonprofit industrial complex, and it's very strong. White people control that, as you know.
Of course.
And the LGBT, how did you call it? That whole hegemony? Shit. You better say your pronoun. I mean,
well, I understand. No, I get it. I get it.
So, well, I guess what my question is, do you have, I heard somebody say something about a curriculum or something earlier. Do you have like a curriculum? Because I'm actually at my job, we're talking about this issue, and we're talking about developing a curriculum, and I have some dissonance around this goddamn curriculum that they want to give about LGBT stuff, and I'm like, this language, I got a problem with it. And I also have to say that I still have more questions, because some of the scholars that I respect, you named some of them earlier, like John Henry Clark and Dr. Dan, Francis Cress Welsing. You know, I always bring you in on these conversations on Facebook. So Francis Cress Welsing, but also there's a brother in Atlanta, and you may know him, Mwalimu Baruti, are very like, this is not African, this is some bullshit, white folks is lying to y'all, you know. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, so how do we have this conversation with black people like that?
What time is it? Now, let me just say this. Black people own this building, which means y'all can say as long as y'all want to. We ain't putting you out because ain't nobody to put you out. Nobody's interested in that. So but we do need to agree on when we're going to end, and we will go a little longer, so we can be together as much as possible. Anybody want to agree to go end at 8? Can we go till 8:30?
It's 8:11 now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't please don't. Bye, sister. Folks, it's been nice. See you outside the box, bro. Oh, we supposed to hug. I'm asking your boyfriend now. See you later. Rudy.
Yeah,
hurt my feelings. And I mean, I was on your side, but it really hurt my feelings the way he dealt with you.
I'm sorry, can I answer that?
The human sexuality is introduced in Baltimore County schools back in the year 2000. So the students know about it now, and they're graduated, and they are young adults like you are now. But it was introduced in Baltimore County Public Schools back in year 2000, called human sexuality. And they in the white colleges now, it talks about lesbian, if you take a 3-credit course, gaiety. Yes, if you go and look on the catalog, everybody has cell phones. You pull up online, Essex Community College, Catonsville, you'll see these courses.
That's white power.
And you see them in the high schools in Baltimore County, the after-school programs. So, but Baltimore City, mostly black, I don't know why it's not, it's maybe under health, but there's not a course that says human sexuality. But in Baltimore County Public Schools, there's a course that says human sexuality, and it's starting in the year 2000.
Two things.
There was a couple of hands too.
Yeah, I think I do want to address this.
And the Veruti thing I want to address.
So two things. One, again, recognizing how malleable white supremacy is and how different people are victimized throughout the ages, right? And so for my story particularly, there wasn't a human sexuality course. And I'm very aware of it now because I'm a teacher now, I get it. But in my story, there wasn't one, right? And so part of my trauma growing up inside of my community was knowing what I was attracted to, who I'm attracted to, who I want to be with, and seeing absolutely no representation of that throughout in any of the world format, other than in the dark alleys of the web of internet, right? And that's not affirming. That's not a loving image or for a place or a human being to grow up from, right? And so when you start interacting with some of the this far as another to Adams is when you start interacting with some of the traumatized homosexual identified folks, you have to empathize with that lack of representation, that lack of knowing who you are and not knowing that you can self-identify outside of this context, right? And for brothers and sisters who happen to identify like Rudy, the approach that I always work with, and this is also a part of Dr. Managa's lens, it's been able to help me. I know it's been somewhat successful. Again, it's not always. Is you have to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's the first thing, right? Like you have to know who you are as a person and what is going on. If you're still walking around wearing your traumas on your sleeve, you cannot successfully engage in a dialogue such as that. Two is also recognizing that, again, there are other things at play. When individuals are that hammered on that particular social issue, because I'm homosexual and I don't talk about it that much. Like, there is something else going on, right? And there's multiple behavioral health sciences that tell you about whether or not it happens to be self-molestation or molestation in their family, or there happens to be a dissonance around religion. Scott Lively goes on his campaign around anti-homosexuality simply because he's Christian and his sister is a lesbian and he can't deal with it. Like there's various different behavioral patterns develop.
I personally think Scott is fighting against himself too.
Well, there could be that.
Yeah,
I don't know
but
that. But again, you have to know what you're talking about, and recognize that cognitive dissonance is again a real thing, right? And not everyone is going to break it that easily. I recognize people are experts in certain fields, but I don't expect people to be experts on me, and that's the first thing.
I see. And this is why I put down, and yes, it was taught at Woodlawn High School because I taught it in 2000. But what I'm saying to you, this is why I put down freedom and identity, and I have to agree with you. Human sexuality, it's not to say homosexuality. Human sexuality is, like you said, it's identifying yourself with what you are, who you are. You know, we put labels on things to say homosexuality. Well, so there's a difference between homosexuality and self-sexuality, who you are. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. You know, what I'm saying is that with you saying that it's in the church that is mostly with the music department, but with the culture.
That's just a stereotypical inlay. I'm talking about homosexual hypocrisy.
With the culture, okay, that this guy has said that we all connect with belief, I believe church life matters because we all get our freedom, spiritual freedom from the church, regardless who you are.
Well, that ain't necessarily true.
Don't you get no mess with her. You just told me.
That's the next meeting. That's the next meeting. No, we're not doing religion right now. All right.
I was just curious about your reaction to. I didn't see it, but the Baruti, because it looked like I
want to hear your reaction to Baruti too, because you know the movie, okay?
Before I get into the Baruti thing, I want to say that I'm concerned about LGBT curriculum coming into black schools.
I am too.
Me too.
I'm very concerned about that. I don't like it. In most cases, there are not black people involved
At all.
in that occurring, or there's confused black people involved in that. So, but when you say something like what I'm saying, you're being called homophobic, blah, 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 blah. But there's some real reasons, given the racism and the white supremacist paradigm that LGBTQ is steeped in, black children who are searching and trying to figure themselves out, to have that be what's stamped in their conscience as part of their choices, concerns me. That's a whole other meeting about what to do about that, but I just want to put that out there that
I need your phone.
I'm not clapping about the LGBT curriculum coming to black folks.
So, I'm a former dean of students for a charter school here in Baltimore, and for several years I taught LGBT, I taught a diversity class, and we talked about all type of stuff. It provided a safe space, because my school is 99% African American. It provided a safe space, so much so that, and I understand what you're saying, especially if it's going to be led by another set of people. It provided a safe space, so much so that children who were afraid to talk to their parents were able to talk to me, because I eventually came out to the children in order to make it more of a comfortable space, but it became a safe space for them to come and have someone who was mature, educated, and scholarly around certain issues in regards to and experience. Like, you shouldn't do this, you should do this. Let's have a conversation about it. How can you maneuver through life and maneuver through situations that you're dealing with? I get it. I get your concerns. But our children, even now as a mentor at the same school, right, there are still children who are dabbing in spaces that they're not mature enough to handle. And they don't understand that any level of sex at your age carries massive responsibilities that you're not equipped to deal with. And I gotta tell my mom that 1, I'm gay, and 2, I'm HIV positive, or I'm sorry, I'm 14 years old and I'm HIV positive, or I got an STD of some type. Like, that's just way too much trauma for a child and a parent. And we ain't even talked about the religious piece of it that goes along with that, right? Because now we're talking about the possibility of abandonment and excommunication from the home as possibly the church.
Well, I want to mention that, and Duke has already said this a couple times, I think, that this needs to not be the last conversation that we have on this. One thing that gets in the way of brilliant ideas actually going into fruition is a lack of follow-up. We do something that can be great and powerful, and then we go back and drown in white supremacy, and white supremacy is all over us, and we forgot about the conversation, but we can deflect that drowning, and there's perpetual interaction. And this space is open, this space is for black people. And it's open to black healing and black conversation, black problem solving, black meetings, black discussions. And so we're here, and hopefully we will, hopefully we're gonna be organizing at some point another part, because there's so much to get into. And even this thing about Baruti, and I'm gonna give a few other names, Baruti, Umar Johnson, and I'm using names on purpose right now. Baruti, Umar Johnson, this guy called himself Polite, and there's somebody else.
Irritated Dick.
The genie.
I ain't talking about them, but Baruti,
Yeah, not Umar and all them.
Well, they have some similar things.
Yeah.
Which is why I brought it up. You know, I don't do nothing because the sky is blue. I do it because, from my perspective, there's a.
But some of the brothers are not considered scholars. Like Baruti, whether we want to agree, is a scholar. You know, I mean, he's a sociologist and talks.
Now, can you bear with us for a moment, y'all, because she brought up Baruti. He wants to say more about it.
Yeah.
Do you remember Baruti's book on this issue?
Shit.
The Eunuch?
I have it and I can't, it's not complementarity. He's written, the effeminization of black males. Okay.
Okay. I won't be able to get into all of this and look at all leaning the biggest. Because of time. Because of time. And it's so, sometimes there's so much going on, I'm trying to figure out because I want to make sure I'm clear. Now, you said you witnessed an interaction between Baruti and I?
I don't know if it was Baruti, it might have been somebody else, but it was somebody that, and it was really sad. This was years ago.
Okay, let me tell you what happened with Baruti.
Okay, tell me.
Okay, Baruti made a YouTube video on this issue. And he was speaking somewhere. And he was talking about homosexuality. And he was shaking his head. He was very emotional. He was very passionate about what he was saying. So I wrote Baruti and I said, and I'm not writing him as somebody who don't know the answers to the questions I ask him. And I'm not writing him as somebody who don't know what's really problematic about what he's saying. That's just not true and subjective and based on a personal issue. I'm real clear on the differences here. But unfortunately, I have to be abstract in that I can't go into all the details except to say that I invited Baruti to a one-on-one discussion. In case he didn't have the courage to do that, I asked him some questions about his presentation and let him know why it was problematic and not true, and he didn't respond. I then told him, like I told these other people, that look, y'all supposedly defending the black community, y'all supposedly trying to prevent harm to the black community. If you think I'm doing harm or something that's harmful, you should be doing something about it. You should be defying me. You should be willing to challenge me in what I say to get rid of the scourge. But they had been afraid to do that. There's some people among the people that I've named who want polite. I'll make it public. I've never called any of them to talk about these issues. I didn't initiate the conversation except for with Baruti because it was on videotape and I was like, what? And then I wanted him to respond to this stuff that he said. He removed the videotape too, by the way, that was on YouTube, and I found it was very interesting. Full of holes and was just crazy. But these other people, including Polite, called me to talk about this issue. And it was supposed to be a public forum at a large event. And this is all public knowledge. Matter of fact, there's proof if you want me to send it to you of the poster they made, the flyer they made, and everything. There's supposed to be a public event where there was going to be a debate between Polite and I. Before the debate, they wanted to film Polite and I talking to use allegedly as promotional footage to promote the event. And Polite had to have a conversation with me. When we finally had that conversation, he canceled the debate. And I still have the file that they made that I can send to y'all if y'all think I'm up here with man drag. No, I'm not in man drag. I'm telling you what happened. He was like, this motherfucker gonna eat me alive. I'm Brother Polite. I can't let anybody see that I'm not that polite. So he canceled it. And every time one of these people try to come for me, I'm like, let's go. They always cancel. Including Baruti. Because their perspective is, see, some of these people, as I said much earlier in this room, they're making a personal issue into an alleged political platform. And our community is so under engaged regarding these issues, they don't know that this is their personal torture chamber that they're trying to make you think is a movement so you could buy their pimpery.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things y'all do agree on is the white hegemony part. Baruti talks a lot about that. The white influence on black, the white LGBT specifically influence. I mean, just hearing you talk and knowing what he's saying in some of his books. I don't listen to his lectures on, I didn't know he had lectures on YouTube, but I do have some of his books. So I think there is some agreement there.
Well, I don't know if there's any agreement, and I'm not concerned about agreement.
Right.
I'm concerned about, look, dude, if you got a perspective, come on. Let the community see you back up what you have to say in the presence of somebody that you can actually engage a challenge on the issue. And they won't do it.
A part of why I was interested in hearing your reflection on that is because I think one of the things that happens is that I think one of the aspects of like Western white culture is that there's a celebrity worship piece, right?
Yeah.
And a part of the function of celebrity worship is the things that you're responsible for in terms of strengthening yourself, you make other people responsible for it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what happens is that I think in, political, intellectual engagement, particularly on like social political issues, people deify ideas that's really a function of them. It's almost like an anesthesia to the pain that they're experiencing.
Right.
And it takes it out of the realm of a real intellectual enterprise.
Absolutely.
And so I think a lot of times that's where the conversation gets stuck, where it's like people have a vested interest in their enterprise, whether it's the personal stuff, whether it's financial, whether it's their position, their sense of title.
That's right.
And so when you say like all those brothers canceled, what's clear is that's gonna hurt my enterprise. That's not about ain't about intellectual engagement.
Sure,
it's
absolutely.
not about it's about that's gonna hurt my enterprise if I get beat.
Sure. But what's ironic about it, people, and we're going to prepare to close, but what's ironic about their followers, it is so ironic, it's not even funny, is their followers are some of these black people who are desperate for a man. The allegedly heterosexual men want to see a strong man so they can feel like they have something they can ascend to. And the women want to see a strong man because they want a man. And they pimp that. And some of these people who are pimping this don't even like women. I mean, one of the biggest pimp that we had in Atlanta, who used to have parades and volunteered to talk about the issue when we were talking about 7-Up or something else. They brought it up, was Eddie Long. Eddie Long had an anti-homosexual ministry, but the men had to be buffed. But that's a whole other thing. But anyway, the point is that if we actually get beyond our neuroses and let the fog of white supremacy and black confusion clear up, we can see what's really going on. Like I said the other day, a heterosexual man ain't obsessed with what a homosexual is doing. You're not going, wait a minute, where my wife? Wait, I gotta see what he's doing with his dick first. I mean, I don't think that's happening. If a brother gonna leave that conversation, I have to go talk about somebody else doing something. There's something going on, and I need to understand that. But we have to prepare to wind down this conversation. We knew it was multifaceted and going to open up some doors. And you're going to be, and I'm going to hear what you have to say, but I want to make sure people know that we are winding down. And before we,
is there a restroom out here?
Right, yeah, straight into behind that clock. And the light is outside to the right of the door.
Did anyone not get a chance to sign in?
I just want to reiterate, because I have to do this a lot, and sometimes people don't follow through for some reason. I think it's a lack of faith sometimes unconsciously in what we can actually do as a people. But we need to make sure that this conversation continues. And I want to also make sure that you understand that this is not my central purpose in life to talk about this issue. It ain't my agenda. It ain't what I care about the most. I care about you the most, black people the most. But I know how to talk about it. And I can talk about the issue clearly and actually create engagement that's meaningful about the issue. But it ain't what I live for. But it's part of what has to occur in terms of topics that we have to engage. Because I was told, for example, through the grapevine that part of what inspired this conversation coming into being was people overhearing problematic conversations about this issue among black folks. Many who really care about black people, who have black affirming integrity in terms of their intentionality, who are actually being hurtful or dismissive, and or who simply did not know the stuff that we presented tonight in terms of these issues from a black perspective. And believe it or not, as much as Duke and I talked and presented, this only covers a fraction of things that we can talk about. I think it's important to deconstruct some of these people that the sister mentioned, Baruti, etc., which I could do in more detail. Talk about religion, mythology, and religiosity. Talk about the differences in why that's a particular issue for black people in this country.
I just wanted to say really quickly, I know as we wind down, thank you for helping to create this space and to like intentionally set a culture in the beginning that was freeing and allowing people to honestly say the opinions and thoughts that they have or what they've heard. So I think oftentimes when spaces like this exist, you are walking on eggshells, and so you can't really talk about what you've heard or what you feel or ask questions. You're scared you're going to use the wrong pronoun or use the wrong definition or say the, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I just wanted to say that oftentimes you don't see that happen where people are like, we're going to be gentle with the folks in this room. And no, you might say something wrong. You might misunderstand. You know what I mean? You might offend somebody. You might step on 80 toes in this room. It might happen, but we're going to work through that. Like, I just appreciate y'all for creating that kind of space. I think it's really necessary, and I wanted to commend you on starting out that way.
I want to commend all of you on this too, and it's wonderful.
Hello again. We just keep
yeah. But what can we do as us as black folk when we leave here? The whole question of being a good ally, and I'm going to say this in the context of a fragile white woman. What can I do as a heterosexual, cisgendered black man? Wait, I'm going to cry. To help my own same-gender loving black people.
You've got to do that.
You gotta bring your feelings into it. You gotta flip that hand. You gotta go all in. You gonna do it.
Why do you black people get up, forget about your concerns, and bring me a tissue? But I use humor, but I'm saying, what can we do when we leave here today, when we go back to our people, to our folk in our home, to our schools, our hostile work environments, to bring unity. It's like you enlighten me that unity with us, among us as black African folk. And I'm glad you're being specific. What can we do to help heal us? Because the major schism, because I teach a theater arts program here in Baltimore City, and one of my gay students said to me, if black folks would stop misogyny and sexism and hating on black folk, we would be unstoppable. And that we shared. So I'm saying, what can we do when we leave here to better our situation?
There's this curriculum.
Bring that dude here.
There's a curriculum called CTCA, which stands for Critical Thinking and Cultural Affirmation. And to that end, I also want to make it known that Amasi is not a center that is specifically helping in reducing homosexual isms and anxiety. We work on the entirety of the black perspective, the black experience.
Amasi is a black community agency.
And with that in mind, this curriculum of critical thinking and cultural affirmation focuses on really contextualizing the experiences that black people have and are currently going through, and affirming them within their own culture, within their own image. We found that across the board, specifically on the cultural affirmation part, when black people feel unionized via symbology, via cultural references and iconography, even the space that you're in now, you had a fireplace going to water, nice, it starts to reduce anxiety and traumas and allows for black people to start navigating and opening up, right? An example, real quick, that modern day, and mind you, this film had problems, everything's going to have problems, but even Black Panther, right? We know that many Black people decided to engage in this activity, and you didn't hear anywhere that Black people got into a fight that day. And that's crazy, considering the context is that we normally know about when we have the family gathering and everything else, right? Like, but when we have symbology, when we have cultural affirmation, when people are intentional about who they are and what they want to know, it starts to reduce that. So in regards to this topic, brother, one is start to research things that we brought up and look for others. Look for Kabaka Mwanga, look for his story. Look for Tutankhamun, I'm not going to remember the name. Kunum-Hotep, Hatshepsut. I also encourage anyone who's familiar with Everyone's Place on North Avenue. They have a wonderful book, books rather, by Maladona Somé and Sombufu Somé, who are a couple from the Daguerre, ex-couple now. But they wrote many books on their...
They're from the Daguerre community of Burkina Faso. The Daguerre community of Burkina Faso.
I said Daguerre community.
You said they were from Daguerre.
I said the Daguerre community. I know what I said was correct. But they have books on this particular subject. Specifically, I have Sobufu Somé with me, which is Ancient African Teachings and the Ways of Relationships, the Spirit of Intimacy. Chapter 14 in this book is dedicated to gatekeepers, which is what we would call same-gender loving or gender variant people. So with that in mind, it's about just, if you say you love Black people, then actually love them.
That's right.
And bring them into your perspective, into your knowledge, and into your advocacy.
And along with Duke recommended, we have to be real in that we don't always agree and see things the same. And if we really want to create a Black affirming possibility, we have to not re-injure each other.
Yes.
I'm going to say that a million times because inadvertently, in many cases, we re-injure each other, and that's a side effect of white supremacy too. Like when the people said to me, you know, that year before, like we are our own enemy. I can prove that our own worst enemy. I can prove that that's not true. If a conversation occurs, but if I'm like, well, F you, you know what I'm saying, and get combative, no conversation occurs. And it's easy to be anti-Black. It's as easy to be anti-Black as the country is to be dropping this and hitting the floor. That's how easy it is to be anti-Black. So to counter something that's so easy, particularly between Black people, in terms of your question, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, we have to check ourselves. And even when we disagree, don't get incompetent and be vicious and attacking. And what I mean by incompetent is not achieving the goal of transformation in education and affirmation. You're incompetent once you get to all of that. You've lost, it's over with. You know, there's no way to create another possibility. And that's why I mentioned our anger and our rage. Some of us have to work on that. To burn candles, roll around the ground, do stuff to let off that energy that we have of misdirected rage and misdirected anger. Because I've been speaking across the United States to Black people for decades and decades. And one of the things that's the most difficult for us to do, a lot of us even realize is the case, is just to come together and meet. I don't like her hair, and them shoes, all this petty stuff that we have because white supremacy has taught us to normalize the being in a hurry to devalue each other. And it's all unconscious. It's not like you sit down with a pen in your, and a cap and a pen in your, I don't be dysfunctional and fucked up with Black folks today. No, you don't plan it. It's part of not knowing nothing but English.
Man.
You're in a prison that you can break out of, but it only can be done through strategy. And that's why I'm talking to you about the strategy of being still in your body, understanding what Black people are going through, and consider compassion for Black people. Even crazy, out their mind, even down limit. you know, be compassionate, not participatory, but compassionate in terms of look what happened to them. Look what white people see me doing. Damn. So I'm damn sure not going to re-traumatize them. Clearly, they're traumatized already.
So keeping the fact that I love you,
If
I
you
want to
do.
heal. Yeah, but also
I mean,
just
if
want to
you
heal.
do.
You want to do some healing.
Right.
You want to do some healing.
Because I want to help
for the
people go out
community.
on love. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I still want them to be healed. I mean, I'm being literal because I'm very literal. You know, that's why I don't use for like acceptance and blah, 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 because I don't accept everything, but I still want black people to ascend out of madness into clarity and become soldiers for black folks. I want that. So I do what I can, no matter how I feel about you, to help that occur. And how I manage to do that when I do, it has to do with my demeanor, my strategies and my techniques, and how I come off. And if you don't hear anything else I said tonight, because this is one of the most difficult things people understand, is that you got to stop using whiteness as your frame of reference.
Yeah.
Even when you talk about saving and loving people, that's poison. And that's re-traumatizing, re-hypnotizing, re-brainwashing, re-establishing whiteness as a frame of reference for you, which is making the enemy your frame of reference. That don't make no sense. White folks wouldn't do that.
Never.
And not that they're all that, I'm just talking about strategy. Like for example, Trump had white feminists vote for him, white LGBTQs vote for him. They're like, damn, all this, we'll fight this week. We want white folks to make up for Obama sitting up there scaring the hell out of us,
Right.
making us clearly mediocre and not superior no more. And it's all blatant now. We got to change that shit up and get the whitest, craziest person who's grabbing pussies. I want him to be president.
Exactly. They came together on that shit.
And it's called unity. They didn't go, well, you know, Trump grabbed pussy, so I don't know. They said, no. We have to make up for the Obama interruption
Exactly.
of white superiority and Michelle. So they interrupted with whatever. But the punch of the man, I just want you to understand that we have to be like that in terms of, and we used to.
We did.
I want to make that clear. A lot of our young people don't know that we used to be more aligned. We used to build successfully, relatively speaking, generally, and build whole metropolises that were, you know about that. But you also know they were destroyed, and they made us afraid to rebuild them because the trauma was in here. We were scared of being traumatized again, so we